And we're back. This is Seth Moore coming again here on Anchor by Spotify, where you can find us. Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Amazon, Podbean, Buzzsprout, and many, many more. So we were talking about the white race. And so we're going to continue with this discussion and where we left off. So as we were just saying, that you have to be careful that you don't get that mark of the Typhonians or the mark of Seth, which means that you have the devil mark, okay? And so we have a lot of our people who are selling their souls for the world, this world's goods. And a lot of you see that as so fascinating, and so because you aspire or espouse to want to be like that. But you gotta add up the cost of what you wishing for. Is it worth your soul? There's nothing wrong with achievement, and we all want to achieve different things. But what is the motive of why you want to achieve that particular thing? What is the motive? Is it for good, or is it so you can grandstand like a peacock and say, look at me, look at me? That's not any reason to want to achieve something, because it doesn't have no real substance. So always have in mind, when you want to achieve something, what is the purpose? Is it because of pride? Is it because you want to stand out amongst other people, look down on other people? A lot of people have twisted minds and why they want to achieve things. Or are you on a revenge kick? You want to get back at somebody or get back at people? Really, come on. So you should always have your desires aligned with doing good, making good in the creation, making good in the universe, making good with people, making good with the Creator. So we're going to move on. Okay, so it says here, throughout the history of ancient Egypt, many battles were fought against the white man who repeatedly attacked Egypt, as history shows, subjecting its people to the most humiliating atrocities. Often the people of Egypt found it necessary to retaliate against their attackers, which is why so many of the ancient texts often speak of periods when the ancient black Egyptians rounded up all the white people, the Typhonians, they could find, and either severed their heads or burnt them alive. And some people would say, well, this justifies why we did what we did to y'all. And it really doesn't. Because if you came to create evil, okay, and so I just read that. And it says, in ancient Egypt, the term devil was once used as a synonym to describe the white man. And it talks about here in this particular section, and it gives the, so as we talk, acknowledges the following: for truly, as Manetho has recorded, the use to burn living men to ashes and or Etheliopolis, calling them Typhonians, and they used to scatter and dispose of their ashes by winnowing. Okay, and it says here regarding Diodorus, he wrote, anciently men who were similarly colored by Typhon were sacrificed by the kings. And G.A. Wainwright described this rounding up and killing of the white man by the kings of ancient Egypt when he wrote, though in the new kingdom of the festivals of Hoin, the earth, the Seth sacrifices clearly had their heads cut off. It is equally clear that on other occasions the sacrifices had been by fire. The Bible also identifies another originating point for the white race when it states that white skin was the result of the curse of leprosy. And you can find that in Numbers 12 rather, 10 through 12, Leviticus 13, and declared that a race of people, the Gehazites, who be born white due to being cursed. 2 Kings 5:27. And see, so this is where they tried to use the curse on black people. But the Bible never says anything about a curse on black people, but it certainly says a curse on pale skin. So it's always been trying to be flipped. And then, of course, it talks about in Exodus 4:7, God shows Moses some miracles he could use to prove to the children of Israel that he sent him. And you know what those miracles are. Moses was told to put his hand into his bosom, and when he took his hand out, it was leprous. So how do you have all these movies and shows that Moses was white? So if Moses was white, when God told Moses in scripture to put his hand in his bosom and it came out leprous, why would it come out leprous if he was already white? So you see the lies and the trickery that has been told to people for, like I said, millennia. And that only happens because if you don't do the research, if you don't read, you'll be jumping up and down believing that nonsense. So it says here, and when he put his hand in his bosom, he took it out, it was leprous, white as snow. If Moses was already white, what would have been the miracle in turning his hand from white to white? But since Moses and the rest of the Hebrews were black, this would have been a very powerful miracle that would impress the people when they witnessed the skin on Moses' hand changing from black to white, which makes sense, right? Okay. And so it says here that Moses then put his hand back into his bosom, and on removing it, his skin had turned as his other flesh, meaning black. It turned back to his original color. That's what happened. It turned back to its original color. And that would make sense, wouldn't it? Wouldn't that make sense? I think it would. And so it said it turned back to his original color when he put his hand back into his bosom, which affirms that the rest of his skin was black. This miracle did not demonstrate that Moses' skin color turned from white to white. Also in Leviticus 13 and 14, God discusses the plague of leprosy when a man turns white in the skin. And in verse 30, the Bible also speaks of the hair turning yellow, or according to the Bible, white skin and yellow blonde hair usually indicates some type of plague. Numbers 12 and 1 states that Miriam and Aaron, Moses' sister and brother, rebelled against his leadership because he had married an Ethiopian woman. They said, "Has not the Lord indeed spoken only to Moses?" You know how we do. We get an attitude when the Creator uses somebody, and He said, "You think God is only using you?" You know how we do. And then when the Creator strikes you because He's saying, "Look, that's my man right there. So you better fall in line." See, and a lot of y'all, a lot of times don't appreciate, a lot of people don't appreciate when the Creator is sending somebody to give you knowledge, and you're so arrogant and you so hard-hearted that you have a mindset of competition, and you have a mindset of me. I want the focus to be on me, when it's not really even about that. It's not about that at all. It's about you ready to shoot the messenger like here with Moses before you even get the message. And it causes you to block yourself from the Creator actually using you because you're still stuck on you. Wow. And we suffer from that as a people. And we need to get rid of that. We really need to get rid of that. So I'll read on. And it says here that they challenged Moses and say, Moses, you think God is only speaking to you, brother? Has he not spoken to also by us? He speaks to us too. And this is what you get amongst our people. You think you're the only one, brother, that's talented? You think you're the only one that got the anointing on you? Think you're the only one that's doing something? And you got to deal with these low vibrational people because they look at it as competition, and it's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate that you have to deal with that type of energy, until the Creator has to tell them, you better chill. And this is what happened. Their challenge to Moses angered the Creator, Yah, or God, or the Creator, however you want to call him. So as a punishment, he caused Miriam to become leprous, as white as snow. And when the cloud had departed from above the tabernacle, suddenly Miriam became leprous, as white as snow. So she challenged the man. See, because nowadays you don't really have men and women, because you got people so out of place representing what they call representing God. They're so out of place. You don't see the miracles like that. See, because you have people who are self-centered. You have people who are on a quest of personal gain. You have people who are thinking that, that God is that you're so special. God is using you, but then at the same time, you're not doing the right thing with leadership. You ignore people. You ignore people in need. See, and when you are leading, when you call yourself a leader, you have to have it all together, 360. You have to be a giver. You can't set up an institution where you think everything is supposed to come to you because you're the only special one. And this is where we have warped, fragmented leadership today. So this sister turned as white as snow. She had the curse of pale skin. The skin would have turned white, similar to this picture where this girl has a skin problem. And it shows, a picture of someone who's turned white. And once again, if Miriam, a Hebrew, were originally white, what would have been the curse of turning her from white to white? So we know that she was a sister. In another incident, it was sacrilege by Uzi-Yuha, or Yahu, king of Judah, that caused his skin to turn white. In 2 Chronicles 26 and 19. Uzi-Yahu became furious, and he had a censer in his hand to burn incense. And while he was angry with the priest, leprosy broke out on his forehead. So you can't be mad at the people that the Creator is bringing or using, because you fighting a losing battle. In another incident, it was sacrilege by Uzi-Yuha, or Yahu, king of Judah, that caused his skin to turn white. And 2 Chronicles, I read 26:19. Okay. And he had this, and it says that, that the leprosy broke out on him because he was angry with the priests. And the priests were the one that went before the Creator to do the bidding for the people. Leprosy is a skin disorder that changes the color of the skin and hair, as explains in the book of the Leviticus. 13:2 states, when a man shall have in the skin of his flesh a rising, a scab, a bright or spot, and it can be in the skin of his flesh like the plague of leprosy, then he shall be brought to Aaron, which is the priest, or to one of the sons of the priest, and they will look him over. Okay, if the bright spot be white in the skin of his flesh, the priest shall shut him up that has the plague 7 days. In the 2nd and 4th verses of a bright or white spot in the skin is mentioned. A bright spot means a spot that is lighter than the regular black skin. Moses said in the 6th verse, and the priest shall look on him again, the seventh day, and behold, if the plague be somewhat dark, and the plague spread not in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is but a scab, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean. This is because the skin is regaining its original skin tone. A black-skinned man or woman with these spots covering some parts of their body can be considered a partial leopard. However, once the plague of the whiteness has covered the entire body from head to toe, the leopard has completely changed his color and begins to look just as an albino. Those people who had this form of leprosy in the Bible could be categorized as albino. And these albinos were the only white-skinned Hebrews that existed in ancient times, though in the minority. If Israel were a white-skinned people in biblical times, why does the Bible only speak of them turning white or becoming white with leprosy? Which makes sense. So you got these people who are claiming to be Israelites, and you only see white people becoming white in the Bible only due to leprosy. So it means that the Hebrews obviously were all black. Okay, on the other hand, there is no scripture that shows any white race being cursed and becoming black as a punishment. You see the foolishness that these people have put out. They talk about the black race being cursed, and you don't see nothing in the scriptures that talks about, on the other hand, as it says, in scriptures that shows any white race being cursed and becoming black as a punishment. But you see it the other way around. Leviticus 13:29-30. If a man or woman has a plague upon the head or the beard, then the priest shall see the plague, and behold, if it be in sight deeper than the skin, and there be in it a yellow thin hair, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a dry scald, even a leprosy upon the head or beard. And then you can find this in verses 35 and 37. But if the scald spread much in the skin after his cleansing, then the priest shall look on him, and behold, if the scald be spread in the skin, the priest shall not seek for yellow hair. He is unclean. But if the scald be in his sight as a stay, and that there is black hair grown up therein, the scald is healed. He is clean, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. Note that, in verse 30, the scripture describes the hair affected by leprosy as yellow and thin, and what is commonly known as blonde, which black women perceive as so great that they invest hundreds of dollars to convert their natural woolly hair from black to straight and blonde like the leopard. So what are you women doing? Why would you go out and get blonde hair? You're looking like a leopard, and you're going to substitute that blonde hair for your beautiful natural black hair. And now you walking around looking like a leopard and you don't even know it. You don't even know it. Looking like a straight leopard. I mean, it's just ridiculous. You're looking like a leopard. And so why would you want to do that? Yeah, why would you want to do that? These pictures show the hands of a black-skinned person with, when they say Michael Jackson said he had that disease, vitiligo. The white patches can be seen on the black skin, but pay attention to the whiteness of the hands in comparison to the black flesh. They have become as white as snow, and this is how Moses would have seen the skin color of his hand when he removed it from his bosom as commanded by God. The late king of pop, as we spoke. Michael Jackson indicated that his skin turned from black to white because of a similar type of disease. Do you really think the king of pop had vitiligo? I'm asking, or do you think he was bleaching himself? This is a picture of a black, talks about a black man who took a pill for a liver condition which causes skin to turn from black to white, although some dark patches still remain on his face. And that's really sad. He took the wrong medication, and that's what it did to him. This is how the skin tone of those persons afflicted with the biblical leprosy and albino would have also looked. German philosopher Schaffenhauser stated there is no such thing as a white race. Listen to this. Much as this is talked of, but every white man is a faded or bleached one. And Joseph McCabe, he said, the accident of the predominance of white men in modern times should not give us super salacious ideas about color or persuade us to listen to superficial theories about the innate superiority of the white-skinned man. For 4,000 years ago, when civilizations was already 1,000 or 2,000 years old, white men were just a bunch of semi-savages on the outskirts of the civilized world. If there had been anthropologists in Crete, Egypt, and Babylon, or Babylonia, they would have pronounced the white race obviously inferior and might have discoursed learnedly on the superior germ plasm or glands of colored folk. So you see this? And it talks about Bishop William Montgomery Brown wrote in The Black Bankruptcy of Christian Supernaturalism, for the first 2,000 or 3,000 years of civilization, there was not a civilized white man on the earth. Listen to that. He said, during the first 2,000 or 3,000 years of civilization, he said, there was not a civilized white man on the earth. Civilization was founded and developed by the swarthy races of Mesopotamia, Syria, and Egypt, and the white race remained so barbaric that in those days an Egyptian or a Babylonian priest would have said that the riffraff of white tribes a few hundred miles to the north of their civilization were hopelessly incapable of acquiring the knowledge requisite to progress. It was southern colored peoples everywhere in China and Central America and India, Mesopotamia, Syria, Egypt, and in Crete who gave the northern white peoples civilization. So it was black people that ruled the world. They ruled the world, and they taught these Caucasoids or these white people how to be civilized, as I just read. In 1849, John Stuart Mill wrote, "It is curious withal that the earliest known civilization was, we have the strongest reason to believe, a Negro civilization. The original Egyptians are inferred from the evidence of their sculptures to have been a Negro race. It was from Negroes, therefore, that the Greeks learnt their first lessons in civilization, and to the records and traditions of these Negroes did the Greek philosophers to the very end of their career resort, in parentheses, I do not say with much fruit, as a treasury of mysterious wisdom." Constantine de Volney, the French scholar who wrote, "Those piles of ruins which you see in that narrow valley bordered by the Nile are the remains of opulent cities, the pride of the ancient kingdoms of Ethiopia. They're a people now forgotten, discovered while others were yet barbarians the elements of the arts and sciences, a race of men now rejected from society for their sable skin and frizzled hair, founded on the study of the laws of nature, those civil and religious systems which still govern the universe. When I visited the Sphinx, I could not help thinking that the figure of that monster furnished the true solution to the enigma of how, in modern times, the Egyptians came to have their mulatto appearance. Okay, and how they whitewashed, basically what he's saying. Its features were those of the Negro. The Egyptians, therefore, must have been real Negroes of the same species of the natives of Africa. How are we astonished when we reflect that the race of Negroes at present our slaves and the objects of our extreme contempt, we owe our arts, sciences, and even the very use of speech. And when we recollect that in the midst of those nations who call themselves the friends of liberty and humanity, the most barbarous of slaveries is justified, and that it is even a problem whether the understanding of Negroes be of the same species with that of white men. And that's when I told you we're not all the same. We're not all the same. You can kill that noise. You know what I mean? Charles Darwin, and we all know about him. On seeing the statue of Amunop or Imhotep stated in his Descent of Man, when I looked at the statue of Enumnap, okay, he said, the third, I agreed with two officers of the establishment, both competent judges, that he had a strongly marked Negro type of features. And it goes on, and scholars are giving their commentary here, where it says, Haldeman Julius said, it is pretty well settled that the city is a Negro great contribution to civilization, for it was the Africa where the first cities grew up. And Adolf Erdmann, German Egyptologist, said nothing exists in the physical structure of the ancient Egyptians to distinguish him from the native Africans, from the Egyptians to the Negro population of tropical Africa. A series of links exist which do not admit of a break. The Egyptians cannot be separated from Kaloe and this is the abbreviation for Timbuktu, nor these, again, from the inhabitants around the lake Chash, all form one race. Okay, and it goes on to say, George Reisner, he admitted, he said they didn't believe Black Africa was capable of producing high civilizations, whatever, but we did, and our people did. Then it talks about the abolitionist Abby Gregory emphasized that the ancient Egyptians were Negroes and concluded in his book, An Inquiry Concerning the Intellectual and Moral Faculties and Literature of Negroes, without ascribing Egypt the greatest degree of human knowledge, all antiquity decides in favor of those who consider it as a celebrated school from which proceeded many of the venerable and learnt men of Greece. And of course it goes on and on and on. And it talks about Thomas Lay, an English traveler, wrote in 1817, narrative of a journey in Egypt in the country beyond the cataracts. There has been considerable dispute about the color of the ancient Egyptians, some authors asserting that they were Negroes, while others maintain that the present Copts are the descendants in an attempt to prove their supposition by the appearance of mummies which which exhibit complexions of dusty brown lips, occasionally thick, but the nose frequently aquiline. The opinion that the former inhabitants of the country were Negroes is founded chiefly on the expressions used by Herodotus, who calls them dark-colored and woolly-haired, and on the character of the head of the Sphinx, which has the Negro features and may be justified or may be justly supposed to offer a correct representation of the countenance of the Egyptians. And as we all know, they've been breaking off noses, shooting off noses. They've been doing all this stuff. Whitewashing, going in there, painting the images over, spray washing them. I mean, come on. It's just ridiculous. Okay, and it goes on to say, Africa has been confirmed as the home of the oldest images in the world as revealed by the recent discoveries of engraved archiplex, which date as far back as 100,000 BC, which is more than 30,000 years before anything comparable was ever discovered in Europe. In addition, the earliest South African rock art dates back to 27,000 BC, where 500 rock shelters, over 40,000 paintings could be found. The original hunter-gatherers, sand people, Oxanians, Bushmen who inhabited most of South Africa were adept at engraving and painting on rock surfaces. And then, of course, you're probably familiar with how that they found in the Grand Canyon, sculptures of Kemet. They found everything that resembles how the Africans were in the Americas thousands of years, even before, Europeans inhabited the lands in the Americas and did what they did. So there's plenty of archaeological proof and statues that are found all over the planet and the Americas to prove that the continent, because there was one landmass between Africa and the Americas at one time before the lands and the maps broke them up with the Suez Canal and all these other different things. They can come over into the Americas within a little of no time because they were great seafarers. And so the way that they actually traveled, they knew the currents of the wind and in which direction they would blow because of their great astronomical and, abilities and how that they studied the stars and the planets and so forth. So they knew how much time it would take for them to get to one vantage point to the other. Okay? After examining the astronomical knowledge acquired by the Egyptian, Aristotle was compelled to conclude we owe many incontrovertible facts about each of the stars to the Egyptians. Aristotle also admitted, thus, the mathematical sciences first originated in Egypt, the cradle of mathematics, that is, the country of the origin for Greek mathematics. So they're admitting that they learned from the Kemites. Okay? St. Augustus, a founding father of Christian theology, wrote, what is now called the Christian religion has existed among the ancients and was absent from the beginning of the human race. The Bible was in existence among black people for ages. Okay? First in Aramaic, Coptic, and Syriac. Okay, let's see. Before it was translated into any other of the European languages. It was from the African language that thousands of Latin manuscripts were produced, making the Latin Vulgate the Bible of choice, which the gospel was being preached throughout Western Europe by the 1380s. At the time of John Wycliffe, the first English version of the Bible was produced, and later came the King James Version in 1611. And this is when you get, as I mentioned before, the changing of the lexicon of the languages, and how that they took the J from this lexicon and they infused this into the Hebrew language and made Yeshua or Yeshua, the J, into Jesus, which is a Greek derivative of Zeus, which means Isus. Okay, is a Greek derivative, Isus, which was called Yeshua, which is Jesus. That's where you get the translation Jesus. It comes from the Greek derivative of Jesus. Okay? And according to St. Clement of Alexandria, a Greek to write a 1,000-page book, it would be impossible to write down the names of all the Greeks who went to the Nile Valley in Egypt, Africa, to be educated. And even those who did not go claimed that they went simply because it was prestigious. You had some that didn't even go, but they claimed they went because it's just like saying I went to Yale, and you didn't go to Yale, but it's because it was a cool thing to say, because it was the highest learning order of the time. Or like saying I went to Timbuktu to study, and you didn't. So this is what was going on, y'all. You had this plagiarism that was prolific, and it goes on to this day. Plato likewise plagiarized. There's that word, plagiarized. That's what I said, because when he came back to Greek with the knowledge of Egyptian, with the Kemetic theology, and he came back to Greece with that, it was so foreign to them, they put him in the dungeon. They was like, man, where you coming with this stuff? Because they didn't believe in that. They didn't believe in the higher God. They didn't believe in higher culture. They was on some pagan stuff. Okay? So he was placed in a dungeon, and eventually he was exiled. If I have my stories right. And I believe I do. And it says that Plato, he plagiarized what are known as the four virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance, from what the Greeks called the mystery system that was originally called the Egyptian spiritual belief system, which actually contained 10 virtues. So they got these from Kemet. It's the same way when the Moors went into Spain and they brought the what we would call the hermeneutics of learning and the 7 disciplines. They brought that into Europe. Okay, so let's read on so we can finish up here. And it goes on to say that the ancient Egyptians also wrote medical books like the Hermes Papyrus. Dynasty 2000 BC, the Kohan Papyrus, the 12th and 13th Dynasty, 2133 to 1766 BC, and the Ebers Papyrus, 18th Dynasty, 1500 BC, also chiseled into the stone walls of the temples of Kon Obo, were the records left by the Kemites or Black Egyptians, which I often say, of the original medical tools they used during their operations, from which the modern day RX prescription symbol originated. So when you see that RX symbol, that comes from Kemet. That comes from Kemet. All things lead to the continent, y'all. In 47 BC, medical doctors of ancient Kemet delivered Cleopatra, 7th son, Caesarion, or Little Caesar, by a medical procedure which in our AD era is known as the Caesarean section. The Kemites were doing this first. So while the Kemites were writing medical texts and performing complex medical procedures, the Greeks was not even born yet. Now listen to this. Listen to this. When they was doing medical procedures that we know as of today, such as the Caesarean section, successfully, they were doing brain surgeries. They were doing brain surgeries. They were working on eyes and ears and spleens and livers, in perfection. They were doing these things, the whole anatomy of the body. It says that the Greeks were not even born yet. So how all of a sudden, of all of these medical textbooks, all of a sudden now we find the Greeks who are getting credit for this. And this is where you get as I mentioned before, the Hippocratic Oath, where it talks about Hippocrates, or, you know what I'm saying? It says the Greeks were not even born yet, only arriving in 333 BC, or some 2,000 years after everything was already established. Imhotep, who was the multi-genius, as we know, the world's first recorded multi-genius, born in 2800 BC, is the true father of medicine. Clearly, all the original credits belong to the Africans, Kemites of ancient Egypt. Herodotus said it. Aristotle never denied it, and Plato confirmed it. The Africans, therefore, are the people of yesterday and tomorrow, the Alpha and the Omega. They the Alpha and the Omega. And the world is going to see. The world is going to see. Because you're trying to rule, and this is why I often say, you're trying to rule with weapons of war. You ain't going to win with that. Because our spirituality, our high science is always going to win over that. And this is why I tell y'all what I tell y'all. Keep your vibrations high. And it says they've admitted it. They the Alpha and they the Omega. And what did Jesus say? That's what he said. Jesus said, I'm the Alpha and I'm the Omega. So if the Kemites are saying we the Alpha and we the Omega, what's that say? That you are the creator, you the God, you in God incarnate in the flesh as a prototype. Okay, so it says the beginning and the end, whereas the Europeans are merely the babies of today. You babies, you ain't doing nothing. It is therefore obvious that in addition to over 2,000 or 200 years of conspiracy developed to deny African civilizations, white scholars and even presidents of the United States were thoroughly misinformed concerning world history, but long before Greece, Rome, or Europe came into existence, there were already numerous black civilizations all over the earth that were thousands of years old. And so that's why you're finding all over the planet, as they go around the planet digging up this and digging up that, you're going to dig up dark, you're going to dig up black, because we've inhabited it all. That's what's happening. However, on the other hand, people like former U.S. President Richard Nixon said in the Hydeman Diary, the black race is the only race which never founded a civilization. Now, you know that's ridiculous, right? You know that's some ridiculous, crazy crap. President Thomas Jefferson, let me read you what he said. Now, this is the President Thomas Jefferson. This is what he said. He said, never yet could I find that a black had uttered a thought about the level of plain narration never saw on elementary track of a painting or sculpture. Congressman Thomas Harwood of Georgia said, black people never founded a government nor made a single step towards civilization that did not soon lapse in barbarism except under the fostering care and guidance of white people. That's so funny, ain't it? Oh my goodness. Scientist and Professor R.B. Carrel concluded, savages included the whole Negro race. Now we the savages now. Oh my goodness, savages, including the whole Negro race, should on account of their low mentality and unpleasant nature be painlessly exterminated. We should be painlessly exterminated. Listen to that. We should be painlessly exterminated. Historian Arnold Toynbee wrote, it will be seen that when we classify mankind by color, the only primary race that has not made a creative contribution to any civilization is the black race. That's some ridiculous stuff if I ever heard. Let me read this and we're going to be finished. And we're going to go to the next segment probably tomorrow or either Monday, sometime during the week. And this French Egyptologist, Gaston Maspero, concluded, on examining innumerable reproductions of Egyptian statues and bias reliefs, we recognize at once that the people represented on the monuments, instead of presenting peculiarities and the general appearance of the Negro, really resemble the fine white races of Europe and Western Asia. Now, ain't that something? They're saying these black pharaohs, they resemble the white race. We're going to close with that, everyone. And we will pick this up. And our next segment is we're going to be talking about the cave dwellers, a biblical description. And we'll talk about who is superior over who. They said that, you heard me read, that after the study they did, they said that all these people in Kemet were white people. And in Asia, they just can't part with the truth. And so until next time, we bid you a great evening. Have a pleasant evening. And it's always, keep your vibrations high. Have a good evening.